Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and it's time for another daily dose of Hour of Devastation spoilers, and we finally reached the end. After 2 weeks of solid spoilers, we got the full set today, and in all honesty, we don't have a ton of exciting things to talk about. We got one rare that was unknown, and we have some lower rarity cards, which are worth mentioning briefly, so it might be a shorter video today, just to kind of wrap things up. Before we get to the cards, want to remind you of a couple of important things. First off, we're not going to talk about every card today, because it was a massive dump of commons and uncommons. So if you want to see all today's spoilers in an easy sortable by rarity and color and all that stuff in an easy way, head over to the MTG Goldfish website. I put a link in the description. Go to the view all spoilers link and you can mess around and see all of the cards, including the ones that we won't be able to talk about. Also, even though this is our last daily spoiler video, it doesn't mean it's the end of Hour of Devastation videos. So over the next week or two, I'll have some special videos coming out like we've done before, top 10 videos for Commander and Standard in Modern, featuring the new cards from Hour of Devastation. Richard is going to join me for one, Chaz for one, Tomer, of course, will do Commander. So keep an eye out for those leading up to pre-release next weekend and release day the weekend after that. So anyway, let's jump into the cards we do have to talk about today. First off, our one rare, Apocalypse Demon, and this card is pretty unique. 6 mana, you get a star, power and toughness equal to the number of cards in your graveyard. No restrictions, just cards. The drawback is you gotta sack a creature on your upkeep or tap it. So I did a bit of research and found that this ability actually is the first time, I believe, that we've had this in Magic. We've had similar things. Lord of Extinction, similar, but all graveyards. Boneyard Worm, Splinter Fright, similar, but only creatures in our graveyard, which kind of restricts how big the card can get. The closest thing we have is Sewer Nemesis, which does work a lot the same way. It kind of enables itself by making some milling go on. But Apocalypse Demon is evasive, and it's super huge, potentially. If you can get 20 cards in your graveyard, it's a 20/20. And while we'll talk about Standard in a minute, I think it's worth noting that it could be pretty good in graveyard-based decks in Commander. If you're playing a self-mill deck, a deck that's stocking your own graveyard, this can easily be something that could one-shot your opponent or two-shot your opponent, stick a Lightning Greaves or a Swiftfoot Boots on it, and just smash your opponent for like 20 damage in the air if your opponent doesn't have a flying blocker. So I think it'll see play there. In Standard, we do have enablers. We have stuff like Vessel of Nascency, Grapple with the Past, even Benefaction of Ronas that can stock our graveyard, help us find our Apocalypse Demon. The question is, can it really take the place of some of the better options? Right now, their premier graveyard deck is kind of green-black Delirium with Grim Flayers and Ishkanas and Noxious Gearhulks, and I'm not sure that Apocalypse Demon is just a big vanilla evasive creature is going to be better than the other options we have. There's a chance it shows up as like a one-of with Traverse the Uvenwald as a tutor target, but even then it's competing with like Noxious Gearhulks in those kind of slots. So we'll see. I think there's a slight chance it could be a one-of tutor target, but for the most part, I think this is a potentially sweet Commander card for graveyard-based decks, but probably not going to do a whole lot in Standard based on the other options that are kind of competing for it in the green-black Delirium deck. As far as the rest of the cards, we got a bunch of different commons and uncommons. Not going to talk all of them, but we'll talk about some interesting ones. Crypt of the Eternals is interesting because it's not part of a cycle. It gives Grixis a tri-land, and while it's a weird tri-land, you gain a life when it enters, taps for colorless, you can pay 1 and tap it, so which is essentially using 2 Ear lands to add blue, black, and red. So it's not exactly a tri-land, but it basically plays like it after turn 2, turn 3. So it's interesting that Wizards would give just this one shard a tri-land when none of the other color combinations have one, and I think this has some amount of deck building implications for Standard. If you're looking for a tiebreaker, building a budget deck, building a control deck, building any deck really, the fact that you get a tri-land in the Grixis colors when you don't in anything else could push you into Grixis over being Sultai or over being Esper or something like that, because your mana base is going to be a little bit better with this low opportunity cost, enters the battlefield untapped even, tri-land in those colors. So it's weird. It's on flavor because of Bolas, but it's really weird that it's the only shard that has a tri-land in standard. We also got a sweet 3-drop for a potential Hapatra deck in Obelisk Spider. 1/4 for 3. When it deals damage to a creature, you put a -1/-1 counter on it, which means you get a snake with Hapatra, and then whenever you put a counter on a creature, each opponent loses a life, you gain a life. So not only does this give you a way to generate snakes with Hapatra, it gives you another payoff for being a -1/-1 counter deck, in that you can drain your opponent out slowly as you're putting counters on things. So I think that Hapatra, it was one of our sleepers from Amonkhet for Hour of Devastation standard, since we figured it would be getting more support, and it did get quite a bit of support. And Obelisk Spider is one of the best pieces of support. It blocks well, helps stall off the game while we're assembling all of our pieces. So I'm excited to try Obelisk Spider in the Hapatra deck in standard. Moving on, Firebrand Archer doesn't look all that insane. A 2/1 for 2, but it has an ability where whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it deals a damage to each opponent. So the big deal here is it gives us 8 Thermo Alchemists in standard. Thermo Alchemist has already been good enough to build decks around. We have had Thermo Alchemist burn decks in standard in the past, and now we have 8 of those effects in the format, which means every time we cast a Fiery Temper, Incendiary Flow, or whatever, we're getting 2 damage, which adds up really super quickly. So I think that this could have some implications for standard, at the very least for budget building, where you can just play 8 Thermo Alchemists, all the crappy burn spells that are in standard, and try to just burn your opponent out. And having 8 Thermo Alchemists, which is really the best card in Thermo Alchemist decks, is a huge boon, because you really want multiples of these on the format. Some of the craziest draws with the Thermo Alchemist deck is when you have 2 or 3 Thermo Alchemists, and that's going to happen much more often with Firebrand Archer in the format alongside actual Thermo Alchemists. We also got some new cyclers, which are worth mentioning at least. I don't know how good they'll be, but cycling really lowers opportunity cost, although the front halves are a little more expensive than I'd like them to be. Beneath the Sands is a rampant growth, but it's 3 mana. Upside is you can cycle it away if you don't need a land. Countervailing Winds is kind of a cancel mana leak type thing. 3 mana is a lot, although it scales better to the late game. In the late game it will be close to cancel, because you'll have a lot of cards in your graveyard, more like a real cancel than a mana leak, and being able to cycle it away is an upside. Also, Dejru's Renunciation is kind of an interesting option for an aggro deck. If you're attacking, your opponent puts up some blockers, you can use it to get 2 blockers out of the way. If you don't need it, you can always cycle it away to find more threats, find more actual removal. So I think all these cards could show up in standard, although I'm not sure if they're going to be insane, but they're worth mentioning at the least, as far as maybe being standard playable in the right builds. We also got Sunscourge Champion, which is kind of an aggro hoser card. It's like the standard version of Kitchen Finks or something, not nearly as good, but it has a very competitively costed Eternalize cost, 4 mana and discarding a card. So when we first cast it, we gain 2 life and get a 2/3. Once it dies, we can Eternalize it, 4 mana, discarding a card, gain 4 life, and get a 4/4, which kind of makes it like the world's most expensive version of Kitchen Finks, but we don't really have a Kitchen Finks in standard. So I think in the right meta, if you're looking for a sideboard card in a more controlling or mid-range deck to fight against aggressive decks, if there's the Thermo Alchemist burn deck we were just talking about, that this could actually be a real consideration, because 6 life is a big life swing, and the bodies aren't bad. A 2/3 isn't great, but a 4/4 for 4 is pretty powerful, especially when you attach the life gain to it. And then last but not least, we have Strategic Planning, which was reprinted, and I mostly wanted to mention Strategic Planning because it used to be like a $100 card not that long ago, because it was in Portal 3 Kingdoms. As far as standard is concerned, it's basically a slightly tweaked version of Anticipate. I think most decks will still play Anticipate, but if you're playing a graveyard-centric deck, Strategic Planning is better because you get to mill the cards that you don't put in your hand. If you're playing a control deck with Torrential Gearhulk, you're going to want Anticipate because you can cast it at instant speed, flash it back with Gearhulk if you need to. But if you're playing a graveyard deck, maybe some Sultai Delirium strategy or something, Strategic Planning will definitely be in the conversation as a card that you will put in your deck. Fairly costed, and getting the cards in the graveyard can be a big deal. still. So anyway, that's been our daily Hour of Devastation spoilers for today. So head over to the site, follow the link in the description. You can check out all the spoilers and look forward to the top 10 videos coming in the next week or so for the Hour of Devastation set. Thanks for hanging out for the last couple weeks. It's been fun doing these videos every day. And of course, let me know what else sticks out to you from the full spoiler. Did I miss anything? Are there any other cool synergies in the commons and uncommons that I didn't happen to see? Let me know. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I will talk to you soon. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, help us out by clicking that like button down below. And to keep up on all the latest and greatest, click that subscribe button. And don't forget to hit that bell icon to get alerts whenever we have new videos. And if you want to, check out some of our other sweet videos here and here.